If you've been scrolling through endless spec sheets, watching YouTubers compare frame rates, and still feel a knot in your stomach wondering whether the laptop you're eyeing will actually survive a night of just one more level, this review is here to cut through the noise. The hesitation is real. Spending close to $2,000 on a machine that can't keep up with modern titles, or that overheats and forces you to shut down in the middle of a boss fight, is a gamble you don't want to take. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through the practical side of the ASUS UX550GE XB71T Zenbook Pro, the way you'd think about it after you've read a handful of forums and spoken to friends who actually game on laptops. First off, the Zenbook Pro lands in a sweet spot between ultra-thin workhorse and full-blown desktop replacement. The 15.6-inch 4K touchscreen is the headline, and for good reason. The nano-edge bezel really does give you a cinema-grade canvas without inflating the chassis. When you open Photoshop or stream a 4K video on Netflix, the colors pop and the extra pixel density makes fine details feel tangible. In a real-world gaming session, though, that pixel count can be a double-edged sword. Modern titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Red Dead Redemption 2 at native 4K demand a GPU that can push well beyond 60 frames per second. And the GTX 1050T, while respectable for a 2018-era laptop, simply can't keep the frame rate steady at those settings. Most reviewers I've talked to settle on 1080p or 1440p scaling for smooth gameplay, which means you're not fully exploiting the 4K panel but you still benefit from its crispness for UI elements and cutscenes. Heat is the next big concern for anyone who's ever watched a laptop's fan spin like a helicopter. The Zenbook Pro uses ASUS's ErgoLift hinge, which raises the keyboard slightly when the lid opens. In practice, this tiny angle creates a better airflow path for the dual-fan cooling system, and during a 2-hour marathon of Fortnite on medium settings, the chassis stayed comfortably warm to the touch, no scorching palms. However, the fan does become audible once the GPU hits its boost clock, especially in tight indoor spaces. I'd describe the noise as a steady whoosh that you notice after a few minutes, not a shrill whine, but if you're trying to stream or record your voice without a separate microphone, you'll need to either lower the graphics settings or use a noise gate in post-production. The heat management is decent for a 15-inch chassis, but it's not a silent salivary experience. Keyboard feel often gets overlooked in gaming laptop reviews, but it's a daily reality if you spend 8 hours a day typing code, writing a blog, or grinding loot. The Zenbook Pro's keyboard uses a shallow key travel with a soft tactile bump, which feels more like a laptop meant for creators than a hardcore gamer's mechanical board. In practice, that means rapid key presses for combo moves can feel a bit mushy, and you might miss a few inputs in fast-paced shooters. On the other hand, the large backlighting and the presence of a dedicated number pad make it versatile for spreadsheet work or video editing shortcuts. If you're the type who swaps out the keyboard for a separate mechanical pad, you'll be fine. If you rely on the built-in feel for precision, you might prefer a model with a higher travel keyboard. Battery life is where the Zenbook Pro's price-performance ratio shows its compromise. The 71WH polymer cell is generous on paper, but the combination of a power-hungry 4K screen and a mid-range GPU drains it quickly. In my own testing, streaming a 1080p Twitch channel while the GPU sat idle gave me roughly 5 hours of continuous use. Throw in a 30-minute gaming session at medium settings, and you're down to about 3 hours before the charger clicks on. Fast charging does bring the battery back to 50% in around 30 minutes, which is handy for short trips, but it's still a clear trade-off. You're not buying a laptop that will outlast a typical workday without being plugged in. Portability is a nuanced point for a 15.6-inch machine. The chassis measures just under 1.5 kilograms, so it feels lighter than many 17-inch gaming rigs, but the thickness about 19 mm means it doesn't slip easily into a slim backpack. If you commute on a train and need to pull out a laptop for a quick edit or a game break, you'll appreciate the modest weight. However, the 4K touchscreen adds to the overall fragility. You'll want a good sleeve or a protective case if you're tossing it in a bag with other gear. Compared to a desktop tower, the Zenbook Pro obviously wins on mobility, but you're still paying a premium for that mobility without the raw horsepower you'd get from a desktop with a RTX 3070 or higher. Now, let's talk price. At a list price hovering around $1,800 to $2,000, the Zenbook Pro sits in a gray area. For a gamer who could buy a desktop with a much stronger GPU for the same